7 minus 1.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. My name is Marina, and I'm here today with my beautiful co-host, Fran. Fran is a rapid transformational therapy practitioner part-time, as well as a full-time elementary school teacher for the last 34 years. I can't remember, Fran. And I am a full-time rapid transformational therapy practitioner and clinical hypnotherapist. I am mostly situated in Calgary, France, in Northern Alberta. And right now I'm in beautiful British Columbia. We are the place where hope is happening, and that comes from our hearts. So to bring you some hope today, Fran is going to introduce you to our lovely guest.
And it is an absolute delight to welcome Mary Joye to the show. And you will know why as soon as you hear her and her story. She is an expert on codependency. She's an author, a psychologist, and a mediator. And she had her transformative journey featured in O magazine. She is a best-selling writer for dailyom.com, and that's where I found her because she has a very good course, extremely relevant to me, called From Codependent to Independent. She has sold tens of thousands of copies of this course, and she contributes as a guest and contributor author to openhope.com, Huffington Post. I love Huffington Post. Prevention Magazine, Thrive Global, Up Journey, Psychology Today, Psych Central, and Central Florida News, as well as many other publications. Mary is also a guest on podcasts and teaches seminars on codependency and has her own podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network titled Mental Health Discovery and Recovery. Welcome, Mary.
Welcome and thank you. I appreciate being here.
It's a joy without an E to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, my name's spelled Joy with an E on the end. It's very unusual.
Yeah. And Mary has her own journey too, which is an incredible journey. Because I was of the same era as you, Mary, the fact that you actually did some of the things you did in your early life was like, oh my God, you got to tour with Kiss. That's what
I did.
Magnet to drew me in.
I did for 3 years. It was an experience. I can tell you that it was. I was a theater major, and I put myself through school as a stagehand, and things just unfolded. That's why I'm all about imagining things and visualizing. But sometimes things just fall on your lap that you don't imagine and you don't visualize, and you got to go with it. And I really had to, because my father had disowned me, and I said, well, he doesn't own me anymore. And this opportunity came, and I went. It came and I went.
And that
is only for being a theater major. Because I didn't go into medicine.
The most interesting thing about the podcast and your history that I've heard about you is that every different show that I've listened to, I learned something new about your life, something that you never said before, and some of the things that you've done. So tell us about your journey and how you got here.
Well, I started my journey on a beach in Florida, so that's not a bad place to start. Though I do prefer the West Coast sometimes. I have an affinity for that. But I was exposed to culture and theater. So there was, my mom was a nurse, dad was a psychiatrist. He was a regular doctor, then became a psychiatrist. And my brother went to law school. So we were very polarized. My brother and I were very, very different. But then I was a theater major, and I adored it. It was like a family unto itself. And like I said, I went on the Kiss tour. Then I found out I could write songs, which I had been doing since I was a child. And I thought everyone could do that. Actually, I had no idea people didn't think in rhymes and melody and harmony. I just did not know that. But I took singing lessons because I couldn't sing very well. And then I learned to sing. So I was a singer-songwriter in Nashville for about 20 years. So I was getting people in touch with their emotions then. I'm getting people in touch with their emotions now as a therapist. So I don't see a lot of difference. I used to have arguments with my dad when he finally, reconciled with me. I said, Dad, you get people in touch with their feelings. I get people in touch with their feelings. They cry when they leave your office and they're smiling when they leave a theater. So, I still see the beauty of it. So I always try, because of your podcast name, there's one thing they taught us in the school that I went to is every session, no matter what that session's about, is about instilling hope in people. So anytime I felt hopeless and helpless, and I have even lately, I mean, I think we all have those moments of helplessness and hopelessness, but hope is the center core issue of everything that we need. If you can just find a shred of hope, and that's what all my sessions are about. My songs were about that, even if the songs were sad, because country songs tend to be, there's some shred of hope in them or some humor in them too.
That's absolutely amazing. So, Mary, your history, I know for us, for me and Fran both, what led us to the work we do today is our own pain. And tell us how you came to becoming a psychologist working specifically with codependence and narcissism.
Well, it was a catapult, actually, because I was songwriting at Time Warner, it was Time Warner back then. Warner Brothers and Time had already merged. And then Warner Brothers got sold to AOL, and I had to reinvent, and I was 45 years old. And so I went from, peace and happiness to complete panic and helplessness and hopelessness. So I looked on my contract and I knew it wouldn't be renewed. And so I thought about going to law school. I took the LSATs. I looked at becoming a teacher. I looked at becoming a professor. And then I said, I've rebelled against psychology and therapy my whole life. And yet in music, that's exactly what we do when we write songs. We sit around and talk about our feelings, and then we laugh, and then we write a song, and we make something hopeful, universal, to help people. So I think when Warner sold to AOL, I was forced to reinvent, and that it wasn't a straight linear path. In that discovery, I found, okay, that's just natural for me. I've been helping people my whole life. Every song I ever wrote was about hope. Everything I ever did. So I said, this is what I'm doing. Even working for KISS, I was a confidant, because, you can't tell any of their secrets, and I never would, and still won't. But there's a confidant quality to that. So I said, I've already learned that. I worked in my dad's office. It was a natural progression that came from an unnatural event of just being downsized. And when they merged, they purged people. So it was more of a catapult than it was a natural inclination. I started out thinking I'd go into media psychology. And then I found out I just absolutely did love helping other people. And then I realized from one of my professors very early on in my internship, she said, "You're codependent." And she said, "I would know because I'm too. My dad was an alcoholic." And I thought, uh-oh, what's that? And I said, "No, I'm just nice." And she went, "No, you're not just nice. You are a codependent, and they're going to eat you alive if I don't help you." She said, "It's not for me to help you with therapy. You've been learning that for 3 years. It's me to help you not die doing what you're doing." And yes, and she was a neuropsychologist. And the same thing happened when I went in my out of university internship. My supervisor was constantly working on my codependent bone, and I have to constantly work at it every day because it's like addiction. You feel anxious if you don't give and do and make everybody feel happy. A lot of show business people are like that. I think people get the misinterpretation that they want attention, but the attention comes from giving a performance. We call it giving a performance. You see a lot of entertainers end up in hospitals with burnout and exhaustion, and that is what happens. They will give till they give out, and that is by definition what a codependent is. So hopefully that encapsulated how I got into this field. And I do love it when I see people get free and healed. And like I said, it's a daily process for me too.
Mary, you need to say this slower, because I was codependent for, my whole life. And then 19 years of marriage, which like expounded it exponentially. The marriage did, because I was married to an alcoholic as well. So you paralleled that as well, right? You were married to an alcoholic.
Yes, and I still get into codependent relationships. I have to realize it, and I have to constantly tweak my life. And yes, for 20 years, I don't present like this anymore, but I was battered. And so, and these not necessarily alcoholics or batterers either. It makes me really upset. People say, oh, there's always alcohol involvement. Not always. Sometimes they're just mean. So, and I was intermittent. It was so intermittent. And they use what we call intermittent reinforcement to put you in a trauma bond. So that's one of the most important things I teach people is that trauma bond makes you, they do it with such intent and intensity. They're really, really nice. And then they're really, really awful. And they vacillate and they make you self-doubt. So if anybody has any intense self-doubt, thinking they're the narcissist or there's something wrong with me that I allow this. No, you're in a trauma bond. That's not love. Or that, but I love him. I actually am working on an article that's called, But I Love Him. And that's not love. It's a trauma bond. You believe the best and the worst of people. One of the researchers I looked at called this phenomenon pathological altruism. It is pathological to be kind to your own detriment. It's pathology.
Yeah. That's something that I have experienced firsthand in my life, in my family, with that dependency on the narcissist for praise, and for this person to literally live for a second of praise out of an absolute hell of a life. And so tell me about the relationship between the codependency and the narcissist.
Well, it's a match made in Hades. Actually, it's a match made in hell, truly, because the narcissist, and in fact, I wrote a book called mental codependent discovery and recovery, a lot like my podcast, and in it, and if people want to access it, I'll probably just upload it on Facebook when I do this. I just made a chart in the book of the narcissistic traits and the codependent ones that parallel them, and the paradox of that parallel. Because narcissists love attention, codependents love to give people attention. Narcissists love to get, codependents love to give. So do you see how you're set up for this trauma bond? I mean, all of these qualities that codependents have are good. That's why they've never made it a formal disorder in the diagnostic manual of the Psychiatric Association. They never have made codependency a formal disorder, but I will tell you, you get disordered if you have it. So, and narcissists, they love to be the center of attention, and codependents love to be the wind beneath people's wings, to borrow from a songwriter friend of mine, Larry Henley. But yes, this is what they love to do. And then the codependent feeds into that system, but they think they're all good. But what they're actually doing is giving to get rid of their anxiety by giving to someone who creates anxiety. Do you see the twist to the twist? So a codependent might look like they're selfless, but they have less of themselves because they're giving to somebody else. Then sometimes they even get angry. Or the controlling codependent does the look at all I do for you, and this is the thanks I get. Or you vacillate between those different, like the doormat to the I know what's best for you. But you see the dance between them is so it's like sinews of a muscle. You just can't separate it without it all falling apart. I always say you can't just leave these people. You have to extricate yourself slowly, methodically, and healthily. And the moment you get too anxious, I tell people just go back to the relationship and then retreat, go back, retreat. It's systematic desensitization. You got conditioned by a narcissist by repetition. It's that easy. You get unconditioned the same way by repetition, by slowly extricating yourself. But I hope people see those sinews in there. I put about 20 things in that paradoxical list about how, codependents and narcissists just feed off of each other.
I was brought up Catholic. And
that'll do it.
Oh,
I was too.
Yeah, that's good. I was brought up Catholic, where death do you part, right? And my mom she didn't say this, but her mother told her, you made your bed, now sleep in it. My mom would never say
I've heard that many times.
Right? You made your bed, now sleep in it. And it's part of the religion package.
Yes.
That, you give, and God loves a cheerful giver and all of that. in your practice, how do you deal with that? Because that is also, I hate
It's
to say it, but
huge.
it's baggage. It's a baggage that, I mean, I wanted to be this good wife because that was the thing. If I was just a better wife, if I was better at this, if I was better, because that's what he would tell me. He would tell me, well, you didn't do this right, and that's why
Mhm.
I did this. You said
Exactly.
that, you behaved that way, you didn't have the house clean, you didn't, whatever he decided to say off the top of his head was the excuse for his behavior. Can you
Blame
please
shifting.
please tell our audience it's not their fault?
It's actually not. It's your responsibility to recognize it. Once you recognize it, it's your responsibility to unravel that behavior. And I mean unravel, pull the thread out. Like I said, it's not a fast process. But you brought up something so beautiful, because I put in the book and in the Daily Own Project, there's chapters dedicated to spiritual roots of codependency. Not to pick on any one religion. I'm an equal opportunity offender. And though I was raised Catholic too, my mother's very words were women were put on this earth to serve men, because she was Italian and Catholic and just first generation in from Italy. So that was the culture back then. But you brought up, Fran, that magic sentence that absolutely changed my life one day. It's that I was reading the Bible because I used to write gospel music too. And it said in there, and the church told me, obey, stay, pray. That's what I heard from the church. Obey, stay, pray. I really did. But it said, the Lord loves a cheerful giver. And I remember I was reading it and I said, the Lord loves a cheerful giver. And then I always say, preachers preach around the commas, because it says, I want you to have and not be in want, and freely give without coercion, fear, or guilt. It's in there. And I said, oh, so, okay, the Lord loves a cheerful giver, and I have ceased to be cheerful. So this is not his will. Doesn't mean he doesn't love me. It means he wants you to give cheerfully, not because some man told you you're not doing this right. That's not how that works. So I tell people that are codependent, and the resistance I get is phenomenal, because that spiritual stuff is so ingrained, and it sounds blasphemous when I say it, but I tell people, when you cease to be cheerful, cease giving. Just suspend it. You don't have to stop. Just cease giving to that person, or suspend it for a while and choose other worthy causes or other people. I gave so much precious things away to a church to build the church, thousands of dollars worth of gifts people had given me, because they were coercing us to give, be blessed and blessed to be a blessing. And they sold it for $41. And I said, oh my goodness, I told you all these things were so valuable. And they were sentimental to me too. They said, well, that's what it is. I thought, I learned a lesson then. That's when I heard that I have ceased to be cheerful. I felt violated by the very people that were my spiritual leaders. So, and there are such things as spiritual narcissists. I mean, it's become a subset. So, and just think of any televangelist you may have seen take a fall. So let's all be careful when we get these messages about giving, because you truly cannot give without receiving. Because really that scripture says, I want you to have and not be in want. It doesn't say need. I mean, if we're going to, I'm just using one model, because almost all faiths have some model of giving. But it's a cycle. You cannot, when people say, you can't give of what you don't have, well, a codependent will. And I've said it many times, if you ask a codependent for $100 and they only have 80, they'll borrow 20 and be in debt and pay off your debt. That's true. I've done it. I've done things like that. I've gone into debt to help other people when I didn't have enough myself. So when people say you can't give of what you don't have, you really can't. You'll end up in a deficit, and you'll end up angry and frustrated. And the person you're most angry with eventually is yourself, which is where I've been many times in my life. And I've got, okay, I have to suspend. I have to relearn, recoup, regroup. Hopefully that helped a little bit. And I hope I'm not picking on any one religion. I promise that I'm not. Every single one of them has some form, especially fundamentalist ones have some form, in particular for females. I mean, we're just kind of, it's changing in the culture scape, but particularly for women, we're supposed to be the nurturers, and we are. but we need nurturing in order to nurture.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I never knew the second part of that verse. I know that narcissism is an overused term now. Like, I think it's everywhere, but even just 5 years ago, it like it's being compounded. Narcissist, like that word narcissism, it's everywhere. Everybody's a narcissist if they don't. What is your take on that now? Because I don't think that everybody's a narcissist just because you can't get along with them. And do I know I don't know. I sometimes think that my ex was, but I don't know. I know he was still in the throngs of his disease, right? So I don't know. But tell us a little bit about narcissism and what is exactly going on in their brain.
Well, because of the addiction model, I'm going to use that briefly. I call that like the alcoholism and addiction is like false narcissism, faux narcissism, because they are absolutely, the substance is controlling them. And that's where the word codependent came from. So you're with someone who's dependent on a substance and you're with them. So you're codependent. Been there, still there with certain people in my life. I have to be very, very, very cautious. But the word narcissism, it is overused. Plus the fact we're all a little narcissistic about something. All of us have some demand that must be met in our lives. That's not narcissism. We confuse confidence with narcissism sometimes, but there's narcissistic people that are selfish, and then there's narcissistic personality disorder. And these are people who are grandiose. They have no empathy. This is the diagnosable illness model. They usually don't change. If they do, it has to come through some swift kick in the pants that doesn't just humble them, but humiliates them to the point of having some epiphany. This can happen usually later in life, and they're usually made in like 14 to 20. They're just kids that get away with everything. So narcissism is overused. But the scary part was the diagnostic manual, because the narcissism was so pervasive. I'm talking about the personality disorder was so pervasive in society. And when something comes pervasive and acceptable and the norm, they take it out of the diagnostic manual. So narcissistic personality disorder was up for debate and almost came out because so many people are like that. And think about it. Sometimes we elevate and exonerate and we're exhilarated by charismatic narcissistic people. So we have to be careful that we're not just calling everyone a narcissist. We all have a little narcissistic trait. We all have a little selfish trait. We all have a little dark side, like Carl Jung. I'm a Jungian geek, and we all have a dark side, but that doesn't mean everyone's a narcissist. But there's a lot of them out there. I'm working on a book right now. I'm just editing the first draft about navigating narcissism and what to do when you can't go no contact. I don't believe in no contact because of the impossibility of it, because it might be your boss, your mom. You know, we talked about parents being that way. How are you going to go no contact when you're 15 years old and you realize your parent is a narcissist and you don't have a roof over your head and you can't get a job? I mean, you've got to learn how to deal with them and change your responses to them and your reactivity to them, and that not allow the trauma bonds to occur. And even when you feel them occurring, to rebel against them and to pull away from them. So no, not everyone's a narcissist. And yes, narcissism is overused, just like borderline personality disorder is overused, and it's in the same cluster of disorders. So I think that that I'll tell you what I am glad about. The reason that something's getting overused is because there's awareness. I do believe, like Carl Jung, the collective consciousness. So there's a collective consciousness that we have been elevating horrible people. Some of them are despots. That's the pathological altruism, what Barbara Oakley brought up, that if you don't become aware of I call it like the lemming response, just to follow the leader. If you don't, then you follow despots. Like, just name one in the world right now. I'm not going to name any of them, but just follow this. That's how people follow them. I'll name an old one. This is how people followed Hitler, because charismatic people, when you're very malleable, and if you follow people blindly, And so this is why this is such a serious issue that every researcher that goes into it says this is more serious than you think, because it is causing people to drink the Kool-Aid, to join organizations that entrap them, to join cults that tell them to commit suicide, or to, have 20 wives or put children in bondage. So this is why it's so serious, because it's far beyond just, my husband doesn't take out the trash.
So in my personal experience with it is that absolute masterful manipulation. And then a popular term, and I know you don't believe in the term gaslighting, but into the belief there's something wrong with me. Especially when I got to the point where I was fighting for my independence.
Mm-hmm.
And even today, there are certain people that doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And I'm okay because I'm independent, I'm an adult. But for years, I was always looking at myself and thinking, but what did I do wrong? Why can they not just love me? Why do I get all this rejection when I don't see the world through their eyes, when I'm not in that situation where I can be manipulated anymore by that charismatic, and in my case, a lot of fear, like you're gonna get disinherited. We're never gonna speak to you again. Lately, I've been sworn at. That's okay. I'm okay with that now, but because I cannot be manipulated anymore. So tell me about that absolute, if we talk about the true narcissist, that manipulation. And the reason I'm asking this, I see this a lot in my practice. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I love it that you brought up the fear, and then the fear just went away. You just released it.
Yeah.
It's like, because the word disown, if someone disowns you, and I was afraid of that same thing. And I was probably 19 or 20 when it happened. I said, and later in life, I went, if someone disowns you, they don't own you anymore. And if
that's why I was clapping when you said it earlier.
They don't own you anymore. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a fearful thing, because you've been conditioned to think you can't make it without this person, because they've told you that you can't. And they've made you feel like you're completely worthless, and they made you feel like you can't do it. But the truth of it is, they're the ones who are the most afraid. You have all the power. If they're trying to control you, that means they need to. They don't want to be like that. They have to make people miserable to feel better about themselves. Always say narcissists secretly hate themselves and codependents secretly love themselves. So to address that, especially with a narcissistic parent, there's ways that you have to start recognizing your fear, and you need to deconstruct your own fear and go to worst case scenario thinking. I know people think that that's awful. We've heard all this stuff about only focus on the positive, only focus on solutions. Well, when you're codependent, you can't, because you don't know who you are anymore. You don't know what you want anymore. This person has masterfully, like you said, they're master manipulators, and they should all write books on how to apologize. They're so good at it. They come with roses, Rolls Royces, diamonds, furs, you name it. Every woman I've ever known in a narcissistic relationship doesn't even like roses. They don't even want them anymore. They just despise them. And isn't that sad? But truly, the good part of all this is when you recognize these behaviors, you can neutralize them. And like I said, it's a daily battle. Sometimes you have to, but they're so masterful. So you've got to really recognize, and back to the term gaslighting. The only reason I don't like it is because it came from I think the movie was from 1942. It's a film about a man who, they had gaslights back then, and he was trying to steal his wife's inheritance. He was trying to control her for her money. And so he was trying to drive her crazy so he could put her in an asylum and take over her money. Does that sound like receiverships we've seen and conservatorships we've seen lately? I know when my dad was a psychiatrist, I took him on conservatorship, I guess court cases is what they were. And he, one day, because he just, he was narcissistic in his own way, but he popped off and he said, I'm so tired of these things, take a day off the office. And he said, have you ever noticed people in receiverships are never poor? He said, this is always about money and control. And so he would do his best to help these people that were having undue influence committed against them. So in that way, a narcissist may be able to help, takes one to know one, and they can help. But gaslighting is really brainwashing. And that's the point I always want to make across. It's not that I don't believe in the term gaslighting. It's that it's brainwashing. It's intermittent reinforcement with the pop terms are love bombing and discard. The psychological terms for that are escalation, like they highly value you and then they devalue you. So it's value and devaluation, that's the intermittent reinforcement. They put you on a pedestal, they make you feel so good about yourself, and then bam, they cut that pedestal down and you're going, what did I do? Just what you said, Marina. What did I do? What did I do to deserve this? Nothing. And you think if I love them enough, they'll see that I love them and then they'll love me back. No. Even when you fight with them, they think you're fighting for them. When you fight with them, they think you're fighting for them. It's a very twisted brain they have.
It is very twisted. No, it's very, and there's this constant, that's actually leading into segueing into my next question. And that is about complex PTSD. And in my case, I get triggered so easily. And it's almost the triggers in my life today. It's almost the biggest battle because I did achieve complete independence from the narcissistic situation, but it's the triggers today that shows up. And I had one a couple of nights ago. Mary, I didn't mention that at the beginning, but I'm a singer as well. And I have an opportunity right now. And I had a meeting on Friday night and people were going to attach something in this new band to my name. And immediately it triggered me, and in the sense that all those fears, all those manipulations over the years, but who does she think she is? Like, she's just going to embarrass us. She's not as good as she thinks she is. It all came back. So those triggers and the complex PTSD. Tell me a little bit more about that in your experience.
And the fact that you're a singer, even more so that they're trying to take your voice away in a different way.
That's good.
And that is
now I'm getting emotional and very vulnerable here.
Try to take your voice away in a different way, because it's like there's so many people, whether they sing well or not, if they have something to say. I mean, my goodness, everybody in the music business makes fun of it. Bob Dylan wouldn't have a record deal right now in this climate. But look what he had to say. Look at what he wrote. Look at the legacy he left in some of his songs. Everyone has a voice, and narcissists will constantly try to rob you of your voice. In fact, when you live with one long enough, some of those triggers are your physical ones, your vagus nerve. And that vagus nerve runs from your brain and through your face, their throat. It's huge. And that's why our throats, will tremble or get swollen when we get upset. Your heart, your lungs, your vital organs, it's awful what they do. So when someone tries to take your voice away, be it a singing voice or a speaking voice or your opinion or your truth, just say it anyway. They don't need to hear it, but you need to say it. Just speak your truth as calmly as possible. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes I tell people, when you finally just can't do it anymore, just go ahead and unleash it. I mean, don't hit anybody, but sometimes you just have repressed for so long, it'll cause depression, and you've just got to express it. Can you see, I think in rhymes, it annoys me too. But you need to express your own truth. And they know it. They already know it. They're trying to just rob you constantly of your truth, your voice, your opinion, your needs, your wants, your desires. We all have them, and it's okay, but they make it feel like there's something wrong with you.
So Mary, okay, so you said that a narcissist becomes a narcissist between the ages of 12 and 16, correct?
So science says. Sometimes we can see it in little kids. Sometimes we can see it in little tiny ones.
Yeah, that's what because I'm a classroom teacher. I teach 10-year-olds. I'm sure there's a narcissist in this class that I'm teaching right now. Yes. As a classroom teacher, this is what I think, but as the psychologist, what would you say to look for both, for the codependent child and for the narcissistic child? What am I looking for?
Well, there is a doctor, his name's Alan Rappaport, and it's the French spelling, it's P-O-R-T, it's Alan Rappaport. And I had contacted him during writing the book. He wrote a beautiful article called Co-Narcissism, How We Accommodate Narcissistic Parents. So what you may be witnessing in that 10-year-old is the co-narcissistic. I know as a kid, I would agree to things my parents believed in, and I look like a little spoiled brat sometimes because I was taught this is what you say, this is what you do. So this child might be in a co-narcissistic, he may be doing that, and we all may catch ourselves doing that. Codependents will even do that too. They'll say things they don't mean and mean things they don't say just to agree with people, to keep that agreeability quotient. With narcissists have very little agreeability quotient, but they might fake it enough. So see, some of these things can be very blurred, but this child may not be a narcissist yet. He might have a parent who is, and he might be mimicking that parent, because children are parrots, children are tape recorders. So this is why we kind of wait till early adolescence and late adulthood, because the brain isn't fully developed till we're 30, and then we can still change it with neuroplasticity. But you may be witnessing, the good guess is there's a narcissistic parent in the house teaching them this. They're either going to stay that way or they're going to have some consequences and evolve. That's hopefully what will happen, some consequences that causes evolution.
So, okay, so with what Marina and I do is we take usually adults, sometimes children, back to back to early age childhood event, and we work through that with them. So as an adult, in their adult brain, they can see what was happening to them as a child that created this, through our hypnotherapy. That's what we do. So do you believe that narcissists are born that, like the genetics, versus, is it nature versus nurture? What happened here? What happened?
Well, I'm going to ask both of you the same question. I think it's, in the words of one of my very wise professors, it's 100% of both. And they, the old saying is sociopaths are born and narcissists are made. But how come you've got two kids in the same family and one turns out to be a narcissist and the other one becomes a scapegoat? I definitely was a scapegoat child, and I would try to act narcissistic to try to get accepted, and that was still be the scapegoat child. It's like, no matter what I did, no matter what I agreed with, no matter how, any attention seeking I did to try to, or accomplishment driven. And as a child, and sometimes I'll still catch myself doing that. I'm like, no, I don't have to please anyone anymore. I don't have to do this thing or do this. So what do you all think? Is it nature or nurture? Because I'd love to hear that. I think that 3 opinions would be wonderful for everyone to hear.
Personally, I really believe in family of origin stuff, but I really believe in inherited generational stuff as well, with the DNA.
Yes.
So I live in an area with a lot of Indigenous people, and I totally believe in inherited trauma on the DNA. So whether it becomes there, and then once you get a trigger and it's triggered, the inherited trauma, like personally, that's what I believe in. And I think that's part of my background as well. It is inherited trauma on DNA, which gets activated as a child in a new situation.
So nature, that melding of nature and nurture.
Nature and nurture.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And sorry to interrupt, in my experience, I have seen, in the one person's case, I'm in the dark, because I think whatever may have triggered circumstantially to the behavior is something that would never be shared publicly. I have my suspicions. But in another younger person, the child of the narcissist, it's mimicking the behavior. It's mimicking the manipulation. Exactly what you said, Mary, with a child. It's like a bully in school is probably being bullied somewhere else in their lives. And I think it's exactly the same thing. So I've seen this, I've observed this, where a person has grown into a full-blown narcissist because it's almost a survival. It's pleasing the narcissist by providing that same kind of behavior to them. And then it becomes out of control. There's no intervention. There's nothing that really brought those consequences to them that made them really self-reflect and think, I cannot do this.
No, and I think the lack of empathy, that's where I would really love for
Mhm.
modern science to catch up with PET
Mhm.
scans and MRIs and new imaging, because psychiatry is the last frontier of
Mhm.
it's the one of the few. I love how psychiatrists, even psychiatrists say it, it's one of the last bastions of medicine where we don't use imaging to make a diagnosis. You know, we just say blanketly
Yeah.
someone has depression when they may have something wrong with their brain. I mean,
Yeah.
truly, we can look and see some of those things now. I would love to see the brain of if we could all get PET scans when we're born and just see the evolution of that. But yes, it's just awful to see somebody going down that path, and that lack of empathy
Mm.
and the lack of remorse. Those are two sociopathic and you know, we call that antisocial personality disorder. I know you both know that, but those sociopathic traits, the lack of empathy, wow, they're so profound. You just wonder if it isn't hardwired. The big answer to the question
Yeah.
is I don't know, but I wish they'd find out soon, because maybe we can fix it. We're editing out a lot of things genetically, asthma, diabetes. I mean, doctors have talked about we might be able to edit out schizophrenia if we can catch it early enough. These are controversial things. I don't want to start a war with
I love
anybody.
the editing out. Yes, the
Yes, they're
concept
not changing
editing out. I
they're
love
they're
that.
not
Yes.
changing the DNA.
Right.
They're editing out the things that are so negative. And you know, people will say, well, you're playing God or you're messing with nature. And I'm like, wouldn't it be nice to never have another murderer walk the planet? Wouldn't
Right.
that be-
Right.
I mean, if one of your family members had something that needed editing out, not just psychiatrically, but in any way, you might change your mind. But we'll just see, because I think the debate is still so wide open on nature nurture. I think you can definitely nurture a narcissistic child to becoming a monstrous adult.
Yeah.
I think, you know, just
Mhm.
let's just go to politics and world, you know, global, what's going on right now globally. This might be one of the darkest times to see this dynamic play out. And I always look at world leaders' backstories, because I love history. I'm not one of those empathic people who love history, because we study it for safety, right? Carl Jung studied history for safety and for collective safety. And you look at the backstories of world leaders and you go, wow, I get it. Doesn't make it right. It's just like, I see how this person came to be what they are or what they are not. So yeah, there's the nature nurture debates open. This is why narcissism again and codependency is such a serious issue. These people would never get up in the ranks if people would pull them down before things happened. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Mhm. And you say that a narcissist won't marry another narcissist, correct? Because they don't get each other's dopamine hits.
Oh, I wish they would, because it would just
I
be a
know.
match made in heaven, actually. And I have seen them do that.
Oh,
I
they
have seen
do?
that happen. It's not a bad thing. It's like, go for it. I mean, that really, they'll compete with one another and they won't hurt anybody else. Does that make sense? Or, you know, they're not dragging I don't even want to use the word a good person. They're not dragging a well-intended person into a relationship and hurting someone intentionally. They're both manipulating each other and they're having a wonderful time. So it would just be best if codependents married codependents and narcissists married narcissists, and then they would kind of, because two codependents would go, what do you need, what do you need, what do you want? they would they would meet each other's needs in a beautiful way, and two narcissists would just compete with one another, and that's what they love to do, is try to win. So
You know,
wouldn't that be nice?
the problem is they don't wear a sign. So how do we get caught up in that, right? How do we like get it? Like, and I'm trying to break those habits. So how do I break the habit of like, wow, he's so charismatic and he's so, he's got all that stuff. How do I, who have been single for a while, break the habit of being attracted to that person?
Well, you
Because
recognize it. And like I said, I still have some in my life. I'm dealing with it every single day. And you know, there's ways I just can't get around it. Um, but to recognize it and to neutralize it and to become as independent as possible, when you recognize that in yourself and you go, I'll never forget when I was in graduate school and studying all this, and my professor had just told me I was codependent, and I knew I had to exit my abusive marriage of 20 years. It took me years for my exit strategy. And remember, I said the word exit strategy. They can take years. I had just started my education, so that was part of my exit strategy, to become educated and elevated financially so I could exit the relationship. But when you recognize it, you can neutralize it. So I was watching a movie, I will not name the actor, and I had an instant attraction to this actor. He was a new actor back then. He wasn't famous yet. And I said, well, I'm instantly attracted to that actor. I bet he's a horrible human being. Because I said, I have an instant attraction, which as therapists, all three of us know that those instant attractions are reenactment of past childhood things. Because usually we're not instantly attracted to the people who are truly good for us. We're calm and we take time to get to know someone and we develop a relationship. Those are healthy ones. But when you're instantly attracted to somebody, so I said, I'll bet he's just a horrible person. And about a few years later, he'd hit people, he'd beat up paparazzis. It was just horrible things. I went, yeah, well, not healed yet. So just recognizing it. And I said, it's a good thing he's not going to stop by my house tonight, because I'm attracted to this kind of person. I still realized it was in there. So I think recognition of it neutralizes it, and then start seeking out people who are the most like you. The people who are the most alike are more likely to stay in love longer. So that's what we all have to work on our friendships, not just relationships with, our love relationships, but our friendships. And like we're talking right now, we're all just giving and taking and sharing and caring. That's what you got to look for, recognize it. And if you feel that instant attraction, go, is this reenactment? Give it time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
I think,
Mary, sorry, Brian.
I just have one more thing to say, because it's like, you are my life. So you were in a 12-step program, right? A 12-step program helped. Oh, you didn't do. Okay. So I was an Al-Anon. Al-Anon helped me break free, right? Al-Anon did. And I have been in it for 23 years, right?
No,
But
I did not do a 12-step. I'm not opposed to it, but I had meditated a lot when I was younger. So I went at that part, and I did, the higher power part. Absolutely. A lot of prayer, a lot of knee time. And I had to recondition my brain and meditation, and I did find support. And like I said, it's daily. And whenever I find myself tripped up, I think all good therapists have a therapist, and I'm not ashamed to say that. There's a book out right now written by a therapist and her therapist. It's a bestseller, because in order to be in a healing and helping profession, sometimes we can get burnout or book that extra session that day we know we shouldn't, and then don't have time to walk our dogs, feed our families, do whatever we need to do. So no, I did not do a 12-step. I'm not opposed to it. Codependents Anonymous, I went to a meeting one time and the facilitator didn't show up. So I told the other person in there, I said, I guess she's out helping somebody else. That's my guess. I was like, I'm going to have to figure out a way to help myself. And I lived in a place where there wasn't 12 steps for that. I lived in Tennessee where that wasn't exactly there for me. And there was no internet back then. So it was mostly meditation and really getting back in touch with myself and what I really wanted, and spending a lot of time in nature.
So I want to ask one more question, and that is about getting healthy within yourself, and in a sense becoming selfish and start to love yourself first, so that you don't crave the love from the narcissist anymore. And I was actually accused by a narcissistic client who who accused me of I'm teaching people to be selfish. And so tell me about how important that is in the healing process.
I am so glad you asked this question, because I never have any, I love improvisation because I studied acting. So I never have, when I go in to do podcasts or talk to people that I haven't met, and you all are wonderful, I just say, what's one thing that's on your mind? Just one little snippet. And this is exactly touching on that. I really appreciate this, Marina. I have heard the same thing from clients. You're asking me to be selfish. You're asking me to stop giving. You're asking me to be a narcissist. You're asking me to be awful. That's not who I am. I'm just a giver. That's who I am. And so I said the one thing that I had to learn to, I don't like the term self-love. I don't like it. It'll still put sandpaper on my heart. I still don't like the way it sounds. So like I said, I'm a work in progress. I like the term self-like. That was the thing I wanted to get across to everyone today. If you like you, that's a whole lot better than loving yourself. Can you start there? Like, do I like the way I'm acting? Do I like it that I'm yelling at my alcoholic spouse? Do I like it that I'm a doormat? Do I like myself for, picking up everybody else's kids from school when I don't have time to do that? Do I like myself for this? And if the answer is no, then start at self-like instead of self-love. I
That's a
hope
very
that
good
makes
point.
sense, and self-respect. Because yes, and those resistant codependents, I know I'm going to keep them about 3 sessions and they'll be gone. And they're looking for every flaw I have so they can, it's like narcissism in reverse. Codependency is a lot like narcissism in reverse. It's like they're self-absorbed with everyone else to make themselves feel better because they're so good. Stop. Pause,
Mary,
at least pause.
as soon as you said self-like instead of self-love, this song, this rock and roll song comes in my head that was like, love hurts. And it's like, why did I listen to that so many times when I don't even remember who sang that song? It could have been Kiss. Well, it wasn't.
It wasn't. I remember that song
Wasn't.
too, but do you know, Marina, who sang that? I don't. Love hurts.
Yeah, for some reason, I can look it up, but I can't remember right now.
And I remember that song too. And I remember back when I heard it, because I was definitely writing songs back then. I said, you know what? No, love doesn't hurt. Jerks hurt. I actually remember that. You jarred a memory in me. I said, oh,
Loving jerks.
Love doesn't
Loving
hurt.
jerks hurts. You should write that song. It would be a great country and western.
Yeah, loving a narcissist, it hurts.
Yeah.
But again, this is not love. If you are hurting in a love relationship, it's probably a trauma bond. And I would invite people, so we don't have to go into a neuroscience lecture, invite everyone, your listeners and everybody who feels like that love hurts. No, that might be a trauma bond. It might not be love. I mean, does love hurt if you love someone and something bad happens to them and there's grief? That's very different. But I'm talking about if someone is intentionally with a pattern of ill-intended behavior harming you and you're allowing it, that is usually a trauma bond. And there's physiological aspects to it. There's hormones, there's adrenaline, there's cortisol, and there's no peace, and there's no serotonin. In fact, people in those relationships tend to overeat. They can drink to get rid of some of the feelings. They just have stress hormones all the time. They're not stress eating, they're cortisol eating from the constant stress. So that isn't love. Love does not have to hurt.
Sometimes
the song is by Nazareth.
Yeah. And I knew every word of that song. And it does teenager, those kinds of songs do teenagers, impressionable teenagers, especially if we're already heading into codependency, really a disservice. One last thing I was going to say, that really, if love hurts really bad, sometimes it ends in suicide. So, it just, if we can get healthy, if we can, like you said, awareness is the key, because awareness, once we're aware, we have a choice.
Yes.
Once we're aware, then our choice comes. We choose to disengage. You call it like the tendons. I called it like gears. If we can disengage the gear, what's this other gear going to do? The other gear is going to have to change, or it's going to have to leave. We have to make that choice, because the narcissist will not. He loves this manipulation. And like you said, they're super clever. They are super clever in what's going to work this time. Is it going to be the
Yes.
roses? The roses didn't work. What's going to work? Intimidation. I'll threaten her. Not
Yes.
didn't work.
Fear.
I'll tell her I will take the kids away forever. Didn't work.
Yes.
I will threaten her that I'm going to commit suicide. Didn't work. I'm going to threaten, oh, the threats, right? And the
Yes.
fear that they instill in. Yeah, when
And
I
the
look,
scary part is that, and I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The scary part of that dynamic is that codependents are driven by a fear of abandonment and narcissists are driven by a fear of abandonment. But do you see how they have different manifestations of that twisted system? So what you just described there, Fran, that exactly. So I'd love to hear the rest of what you were going to say, because that is the scary part, is that we don't recognize it and extricate ourselves from it.
So in my experience, something else that I've been through is there was an absolute addiction to the drama that was constantly created in this dynamic. And that was almost the hardest thing to tear myself away from, because it was entertaining in a way. Like it would be like every day, do I have a message? Is what happened now? Like, and even now when I speak to family members, I became quite numb to the drama. I try my best to disengage from it. And even when I tell my husband about the conversation afterwards, is to say, listen, I can tell you the details of this conversation about this family member, but the moment I start to portray everything that's happening there, my emotions get triggered again. So all I want to say to you is nothing has changed. It's still the same drama, and I'm so grateful that we have a life free from that. But that was
Yes.
quite significant, kind of divorcing myself from the drama.
Exactly. And the devil's in the details. So when people ask you details, those PTSD symptoms come up. It happens to me all the time. I tell people, okay, I have to stop now because I feel my vagus nerve kicking off. I actually tell people that.
Exactly.
You're asking me, I know you're curious, and like family members that don't know every story I've ever had, or people that'll ask me about things because I have written. I go, okay, I need to stop talking about that. I need to stop giving power to that, because I'll feel those PTSD symptoms come up, the trauma ones of agitation and negativity and not feeling hopeful. And so the best way to get independent from that is just like you said, is just make blanket statements and just to evolve past with the dissolve. They're trying to dissolve you, so you're trying to evolve when they're trying to dissolve you. So just to make those blanket statements is a beautiful thing. It was like Fran was saying that, then the 12-step programs do help a lot, because it's a successive thing. It's the only thing I don't like about the 12-step thing is when you say I am powerless, because that's the message the narcissist wants to give you. And we actually do have some power. And yes, it's great if you have a higher power, but we do. So when you say I am powerless over this, that's where it deviates from the addiction model, is you're not powerless. You're really not. If you start realizing, and if you are codependent and you're out there listening to this, if you start realizing that the only reason someone is trying to control you is because you have the power over them, they're scared you're going to leave. And if you start acting out of that power, not abusing the power, not becoming a cruel person, but if you start acting on that feeling and sense that they're only trying to control me because they feel like they're out of control, then you realize, wait a minute, I have power, because nobody tries to control people who are powerless. No one does that. Kind of like a receivership. It's always about the money. This is always about the control. So yes, let's just all be self-aware. That's how you self-care. And I just appreciate sharing with both of you today. I love hearing from other therapists. And yes, codependent clients are sometimes the most difficult to work with, because they trigger us. And we're on the other side of a lot of it, and they'll get mad at us. Do they get mad at you too? I'm just curious. As if they get mad at you.
For a lot, there's so many buts, but you say that but, because it's just programmed into them, right? So Marina and I are really good at deprogramming. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, it's
Editing.
deprogramming. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes. Well, Mary, this was absolutely phenomenal. We will have
Thank
to get
you.
you back. I can talk with you for hours.
Oh,
It was
same here.
lovely.
You're
Thank
both
you so
wonderful.
much for being here today. Really
how do,
appreciate it.
yeah, how do people get a hold of you, Mary?
Well, I'm
And
pretty easy to find because of how you spell my name. It's Mary Joye with Joye with an E on the end. But you can find me at dailyom.com. I've got 4 courses on there on Amazon. And then my website is winterhavencounseling.com for any coaching or anything that people want to talk about. And I'm working on the book about how to live with a narcissist when you can't go no contact, because you just can't go no contact all the time. So there's ways to navigate that. It's called navigation because we have to navigate around it. So that's how people can find me. Like I said, I'm easy to find, and I wish everyone well. And I think you're both just wonderful. I love talking to other therapists. It's good therapy to talk to other therapists. We seldom get to do that, do we?
that's right. Yeah. And if you enjoyed our show today, dear listeners, subscribe. We love it when we hear a ping. Somebody new has subscribed to our Hopenning.
Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Fran,
Thank
as always.
you.
Thank you, Mary. And we will see you next time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, you all.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.